Welcome to this December 12th webinar, where we will be discussing Wisconsin Timely Initial Evaluation. My name is Rachel. I am on the training team here at JMC. I am in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, where it is a freezing cold, very, very frigid day. I've been on the training team here at JMC for about 2 years. I joined JMC after spending almost 15 years in the college classroom, and then working for a few years as a Catholic elementary school administrator. And today I am joined by Greg Gilman. He's one of our developers, one of our state reporting gurus. Greg, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Rachel. Can you hear me?
It's a little bit quiet, but I can hear you.
Okay. Yep. Hi, Greg Gilman. I've been with JMC for over 25 years, specializing in state reporting, and including the wonderful state of Wisconsin and WISEdata and all things WISE.
All right, thanks, Greg. And I think part of it was just the volume on my computer. I turned you up and I'm good to go. All right, so today we're going to be talking about that timely evaluation reporting. Initial evaluation in WISEdata ensures students receive timely evaluations for special education eligibility, a right guaranteed under federal law. By accurately tracking evaluation timelines, schools can support compliance and improve educational planning for students needing specialized services. JMC makes it easy to report your students' timely evaluation, whether you house your special education data with us or with a third-party vendor. We're happy to take any questions you might have. You can go ahead and put them in the Q&A feature here in Ring Central, and then we will get to questions at the end of each section in this webinar. So we're going to start by talking about how you want to configure your EdFi settings for reporting your special education records. You can easily configure EdFi settings in JMC Office to enable secure data sharing with the Wisconsin DPI through the WISEdata portal. On the Administrator Options page, you can set permissions for special education data sharing for schools who submit all their special education records with JMC, or you can set up an automatic update option to import special education data via WISEdata if your school uses a third-party vendor to submit special education records. So schools using JMC to submit all of their special education records, which is less common. Most of our Wisconsin schools do use a third-party vendor, but if you are using JMC to report all of your special education records, you would go to File, Administrator Options, and then click on the EdFi settings link, which would take you to this page here, and we'll show you how to get there in a live look as well. Then you'll want to configure your EdFi settings for WISEdata submissions. So what you'll do if you are reporting through JMC, this check mark here, this checkbox, you'd place a check mark in the enable, creating, and posting of EdFi special education, those SEPA and sepia resources, in that checkbox to allow WISEdata to access special education program details through JMC, including student entry and exit dates, instead of using a third-party vendor like Seeds, SpedForms, or Oasis. Did I get all of that right, Greg?
Sounded great.
All right. And then the other option, if you are using that third-party vendor, so schools using a third-party vendor to submit their SEPA and sepia records can head to the same page here, that File, Administrator Options, and click on the EdFi settings link. And then what you'd want to do is place a check mark in the Enable Scheduled Update checkbox and click the alarm clock icon to designate a time during the evening when users are no longer entering data into the database to allow updates to occur on a nightly basis. So you can update and pull those records in to JMC so that you can have a full picture of the students' educational needs, even if you're not using JMC for those SEPA and sepia records. All right, and let's take a live look. And Greg, feel free to jump in if there's anything that you want me to address or spend any more time on. But we're here in a Wisconsin database. So from our homepage, we're going to come to File, Administrator Options, and this is where our EdFi settings page lives. So click on your EdFi settings, and you can see here that I do not have this checkmark checked. So again, that's most typical for most of our Wisconsin schools. They would not have that checked. Oh, I don't have either one checked here, but I would probably then want to place a check mark in this enable scheduled updates so that my my special education records can be updated. When I'm importing those records, I can't make any changes to them, but I can view the students' special education records if I'm bringing them in. Anything else you'd like to add to that, Greg?
Nope, that looks good.
Okay. All right, and it doesn't look like we have any questions. If you do have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in that chat feature, and then we can address it. All right, so creating special education records in JMC. Wisconsin schools are required to submit Student Education Organization Responsibility Association records, so those SIORA records, through their student information systems. While many schools use third-party vendors for submitting special education eligibility or service records, so your CPA or your SEPA records, JMC offers the flexibility to manage all special education data in one place. With intuitive tools designed for accuracy and efficiency, JMC simplifies the process of entering and reporting special education records to the WISEdata portal, whether you're submitting just SIORA records or handling all special education reporting in JMC. So to create your student special education record, head to the special education tab on the View Student Data page. So you'll head to View Student Data, and then you'll want to, you can't see the tab in this screenshot, it's just right over here, but you'll want to click on the special education tab. You want to find the student whose records need updating. So you would put their name up here in that find field. And then the next step is to enter a date in the original special education entry date field, or click the calendar icon to select the student's original date of entry into a special education program. Oh, sorry. I thought I was missing a step in there. Step 3, and this is optional. You can enter a date in the special education end date field, or click the calendar icon to select the special education program's end date if the end date is known. The next step is to click add a row or add row, this button right here, to create a new special education record for the student, and then click the edit button to begin editing that record. Next, you'll want to select the appropriate option from the record type dropdown list to choose the type of special education record you'd like to create. Fun fact, the record type dropdown list will only show SIORA or those the responsibility records if your school submits your special education eligibility and service records through a third-party vendor to simplify the data entry process. And this is one of those tools that I think Jeff and Greg have done such a good job at providing our Wisconsin schools, is that they don't let you add more information than you need. So it's just limited to that record type that you're sending. If you're only submitting your SIORA records through JMC, it won't even let you put the other records in there, as long as you have that EdFi settings page set up correctly that like we talked about at the beginning. Next, you'll want to enter the special education details associated with the selected record type in the appropriate fields to complete the special education record. And step 7, click the update button to save your special education record, or the cancel button to discard it. So the last step, repeat steps 4 through 7 to create additional special education record types. All right, helpful tip, if your school submits only SIORA records through JMC, you can import the CPA and SEPA records. We kind of talked about that step a little bit. So you can head to Wisconsin Special Education History, update Special Education History from EdFi API, and we'll take a closer look at how to do that in just a minute. So we can take a live look here at creating special education records in JMC. All right, and I'm just going to open up. All right. I'm going to head to my View Student Data page. All right, I'm maybe going to find a student who doesn't already have a record created. Here we go. All right, so here's that special ed tab that I was talking about. So if you click on that tab, the first thing you want to do is you can enter a special ed entry date here. If Greg, would this date be the date that a parent granted permission for special education evaluation?
That would be actually, instead it would be the very first day they had service.
Oh, okay. So this is the first day of service up here. Gotcha. Okay.
And that since the special ed records you're about to create are specific to a year, that information would be lost over the years. They may have been in special ed for many years if they're a high school student, for example.
Okay.
So that is what was the original date they became a special ed student.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. So once I'm here, I'm going to click Add Row, and I'm going to click Edit to be able to edit this row. And here's that responsibility begin date. That's what I was getting confused about here. So you have your responsibility begin date, and you can type it in, or you can click on that calendar icon. But here's that record type drop down, and you can see I can only enter the COR record. And that the reason, let's see if I still have this open. The reason is because this checkbox is not checked. And I should maybe just give a disclaimer here too. This page, your EdFi settings page, is probably already set up exactly how you need it set up. You don't need to go in here and change anything. I mean, maybe if you're a new school, or if you're deciding not to use a third-party vendor anymore, then you might make changes here. But I would say for the most part, for most of the schools out there, this is going to be set up the way that you need it to. But I'm going to place a check mark in this box just quickly to show the difference here on the View Student Data page. So I'm going to place a check mark here, and I'm going to click Save. And then when I'm on this student data page, I might just need to refresh my page. And now you'll see I have additional options here to create those SEPA and sepia records. All right, anything else that, oh, I can show you here too. Once you click a different record type, it populates with the fields that you would need to accurately complete that record. Anything else you want to add about adding those special education records, Greg?
No, just what I like on it is if you'll hold on that record type drop-down list, the words in parentheses are really informative here. The responsibility, the CR record, is this whole business of a timely initial evaluation is that there is a 60-day window once basically the parents or somebody along the line has requested that this student be evaluated for potentially being a special ed kid. They have 60 days, whoever has got the kid at that time, they have 60 days to get that evaluation done. And then, so that is the eligibility record. So if you go to that record now, so this is the evaluation process. Is the kid eligible? Okay. Consent to receive evaluation determination date. This is all documenting the steps in determining whether a kid is eligible. The idea indicator, that one is not slap you in the face. Obvious. If you work with special ed a lot, you know what that means. But that basically means this kid is, we're going to put him in special ed. He qualifies. So the evaluation being complete, they may or may not be special ed. So that last, and then the bottom parts are, okay, for some reason, my district did not get this person evaluated in the 60-day window required. What was the reason? And you either can fill it out from the drop-down list, or you can fill in something on the evaluation late reason. Generally, these are going to be done in the third-party SPED vendor software. Okay, so it's a question of whether you're filling them out here or whether you're just looking at them. We'll get into that later, but the idea is if you're using a third-party SPED vendor to submit this, you won't be able to edit here, but you will be able to see them here once they're imported. And then the last record type is the actual service. So that's essentially the third step. Did the kid qualify for special ed? If so, let's document their spans of special ed service within this district.
Great. All right. And if anybody has any questions on creating those special ed records, go ahead and put them in the chat.
Nothing in the chat so far.
All right. Okay, then the next thing that we'll look at is updating a student's special education history and importing records submitted through a third-party vendor. So this process that Greg and I have been talking about, we'll show you how to do that here. Easily import special education data into JMC from SEED, SPED forms, or OASIS to utilize JMC's data management capabilities while maintaining third-party data sharing for state reporting purposes. With seamless integration through the WISEdata API and access to membership reports and special education history, JMC helps Wisconsin schools maintain accurate and up-to-date records while gaining a comprehensive view of each student's educational needs. To get started, log into JMC Office and head to Wisconsin Special Education History, update Special Education History from EdFi API. So Wisconsin Special Education History, and then update Special Education History from EdFi API. Step 1, you'll want to click this update button to import special education history items from a third-party application into JMC. So your helpful tip here is to view those imported special education records. For an individual student, you head to the View Student Data page and click on the Special Education tab. So where we just were in the program, once you've pulled in these records here, that's where you can go and view the student's records. Fun fact, the update button for importing Wisconsin special education data in JMC is only enabled for schools who submit special education records to WISEdata via a third-party vendor. So this is that piece that I was talking about. I'm going to go back here. This button will only be available if you need it. So those safeguards that Greg and Jeff put in place to only give you those options for the method that you're using to report those special education records. Step 2, you can click the print summary button to obtain a printed copy of the transferred records, or click the cancel summary button to return to the update special education history from EdFi API page. So we'll take a live look here at importing those records.
I do want to add while you're getting ready for the live look that a couple of things. If you've got scheduled updates enabled for your EdFi settings, you don't necessarily need to do this import. It won't hurt. It will give you the most current information that's in WISEdata. You'll need to go back to your EdFi settings.
Yep. I was bringing this up to show what happened. So if this checkbox is checked, then you can't update this here. So I'll come back in, uncheck this checkbox. Oops, I forgot to hit save. Uncheck my checkbox. Come back here and I'll refresh my page. And now I have that option to update. So if I want that, would you say, Greg, like this is if I want an immediate update? I know there's maybe been a change. I want to hit that now. I don't want to wait for my automatic update overnight. I can update right here.
Yes, it'll get you the latest and greatest that's out in the ODS for WISEdata at the moment. Awesome. So as soon as your people submit data from their third-party SPED vendor, allow for a little bit of buffer time, depending on how busy the servers are, maybe up to a half hour or an hour, but otherwise it could be almost instantaneously. You can pull it into JMC. And Rachel, why do you think they would want to have that information in JMC if it's already in the third-party SPED vendor software?
Well, I think for administrators and for teachers to have a better idea of what the special ed services are, you kind of have a more comprehensive view of the students' needs overall.
Yeah, and once those records are in JMC, you can not only view them in the View Student Data page, as Rachel mentioned, but you can also go to our query engine and attendance students lists. And you will notice then that you could query only in a limited, only in what's in the SEPA, CPIA, and CIORA records, but you can query those in the special education. We don't give a whole lot, but at least you're able to, well, go to the special ed history category.
Okay, I see. Oh my, yeah.
Yeah. So if any of the SEPA, CIORA, CPIA fields, you can actually query them. And again, this would be probably an administrator who doesn't normally work in a third-party sped vendor software, they can still at least do some basic queries. How many kids do I have that have this disability? Or how many special ed kids do I have at the moment?
Awesome.
There's a few other reports in GMC that take advantage of it too. But so if you go to, for example, in the Wisconsin module, special education history, there is the very first one there. I don't think it's commonly used, but it's called special education status. Excuse me. And it will tell you basically on a given date how many kids are in special education and a little bit of detail about their special ed services. So as kids come and go from special ed, you may want to know, was this kid in special ed on this day? This is a nice little report just for that.
Great. Thank you for walking me through that, Greg. All right. Anybody have any questions on importing those records? Pull up my chat here. I don't see any questions. Then the last thing we'll look at is copying student special education records. The ability to import your Wisconsin special education history from a prior year. Special education history records contain details about a student receiving special education services that need to be updated yearly for state reporting purposes. The import special education history from prior year page in JMC Office gives users a quick and efficient way of copying completed special education records from one school year to the next to prepare for upcoming state reporting milestones. So once special education records are completed in the prior year in JMC Office, switch to the current year and head to Wisconsin Special Education History, import special education history from prior year to update records for the current year. Step 1, enter the first day of school in the begin date field, or simply click the calendar icon to set the beginning date for all special education history records. Helpful tip: complete all special education records in the prior year before importing to the current one to ensure this one-time import contains completed records. Step 2, click the import button to import ongoing special education records from the prior year for all students that have not yet been updated for the current year. And a fun fact, students exited from special education in the prior year will not have a record created in the current year, as they're considered finished with the program. And I know, Greg, there was something you wanted to add here about the record types that get imported from one year to the next.
Yes, and before I mention record types, I want to underscore that the only reason you would be able to do this or want to do it is if you're not using a third-party sped vendor. If you're maintaining all your CRA and CPA and CEPA records in JMC, this allows you to roll that data forward to the new year. Their kids are assumed to be in special ed unless they've been exited. But for the new year, you'll need to get that initial record in. And it just brings over all of their special ed settings from the prior year. Of course, you can edit them if you need to. Again, this assumes you're doing it in JMC and not using a third-party sped vendor. The piece that Rachel was referring to a moment ago is, it doesn't say it on the screen right now, but I'm adding a little comment to it. It will say only CEPA records get imported. The CR and the CPA are kind of a one-time deal, but CEPA records are ongoing spans of special ed service. They're only likely to have that initial valuation one time for the CR and the CPA record, probably during their preschool or early elementary years, and then those records don't need to be copied forward. They'll probably never happen again. All we're doing from that time on is documenting their service, their CEPA records. Here's the kind of services they are receiving because they've been evaluated, they are special ed, and they're going to stay in special ed until they're exited.
So Greg, I'm sure I'll find out in just 1 second here, but then is this import button disabled if our schools are using a third-party vendor?
Correct.
Well, we'll take a live look at it. Okay, so from our I'm in Wisconsin here, special education history, and then it was the update special education history. Nope, import, sorry. Okay, so the first thing I got was that reminder that this process should only be completed once. And like Greg said, this option is disabled in EdFi settings. So again, that safeguard that keeps you from doing a process that you don't need to do depending on how you report those special education records. So I'll go back to my EdFi settings. I will check this box one more time and I will hit save and come back here to refresh my screen. Reminding me one more time that it should only be run once, but now I have the button enabled to import those records from the prior year. All right, any questions on importing records? Or just any questions in general as we get ready to wrap up this webinar?
Just one further comment that this presentation was really complete and it showed both sides of it. It showed when you're using a third-party sped vendor and when you're not. So you kind of have to sift through a little bit and say, oh, this is what I do, this is what I don't do. Potentially what we could do, Rachel, I'm not sure if we would ever do it this way. If we could just create a two of these and say, this is what it looks if you're using a third-party sped vendor, just use this video. Or alternately, this is what it looks like if you don't use a third-party sped vendor, just use this video.
Yeah.
The thing that occurred to me is because we're showing both sides of it here, hopefully people are able to sort out which ones pertain to their scenario.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, one of my features, I keep bragging about it. It's you and Greg, or I'm sorry, you and Jeff, but I really like how things have been disabled when you don't need to be using them. But I think the most important thing to do would just not be making changes to that EdFi settings page if you don't need to be. Your administrators and your special education coordinators, I'm sure, have that set up the way that it needs to be. So just making sure that you follow the directions for the type of reporting or for the method that you use for publishing your special education records. All right, I don't see any questions coming in, so I think we're going to wrap up this webinar. We'll finish up with some JMC news and upcoming events. Oh, now we do have a question. All right, Tammy's asking, a 3-year-old needs a WISE ID to start the initial evaluation. What steps do we need to take to issue a WISE ID without sending an enrollment record to WISEdata? Do you know the answer to that one, Greg?
Sure. Great question, Tammy, and this came up during support this fall, so I have worked through this. First of all, acquiring a WISE ID is its own process, and we may or may not have a webinar on it. I think we might. If you want to check for that while I'm talking for a moment.
Sure. Yeah.
We have a resource on that. That's a separate step. And yes, for 3-year-olds, if we're going to report them, we do need a WISE ID, but if they aren't actually enrolled, we may need to do the COR record because, okay, somebody maybe during a special ed or a preschool screening process decided maybe this kid should be evaluated for special ed. So that makes us create the COR record. Then down the road, possibly we need to do within 60 days, whether it's in JMC or the third-party sped vendor, somebody needs to do the evaluation and then determine whether they are actually going to receive special ed services. That's the special ed part of it. Now, separate from that is we needed to acquire a WISE ID. We'll see if we can find a resource for you for that, if that's what you're asking about. But more importantly, what we saw was people were putting the COR record in correctly, but they were getting an error, and I don't remember the exact wording, but it had to do with the kid was shouldn't have been enrolled or is not enrolled. And so what we had to do there is go to the enrollment history record, not the special ed history, but the enrollment history record. The kid would by default have an enrollment history record, and it probably got submitted. But is this kid actually enrolled? Is he going to school yet? He or she? Probably not if it's just a 3-year-old. Maybe they are if they're receiving, if they're in some kind of an early childhood class where 3-year-olds can be in there. But I think that's not a very likely scenario. So what we'd have to do is you can go in again on the View Student Data page, Enrollment History tab, edit the kid's record, and there's a checkbox there that says Include in WISEdata. You need to uncheck that and save. And then what happens is we do get to submit the CORA record, but we do not end up sending an enrollment record or a student school association, or an SSA is what we do for a shorthand term. So
You want to
yes.
walk through those steps one more time, Greg, and I'll just kind of show where that lives on a student.
Sure. Okay, so in this case, let's go to special ed first. Special ed history, and they would need a CR record. Fill that out as we've been talking about. Okay, we do need to put a date in there. Okay, but now if you go to their enrollment tab, if this kid is not actually enrolled in the school yet, go to edit, that checkbox right there, and then update. And that way they don't get an SSA submitted. It doesn't state. Submitting an SSA essentially says this kid's going to school here now, when in fact your 3-year-old that was being assessed was probably only just going through some sort of a preschool screening, and somebody decided that they may need to be assessed for special ed services. Does that answer your question, Tammy?
Yes. All right. And I did find one resource here on, what's the title of it?
Oh, by the way, just unchecking the box doesn't do the work. You have to remember to resubmit the student too.
Okay.
If you inadvertently said that they were attending by not having that unchecked, you need to uncheck it, save it, submit. I think that was implied but not stated here.
Yeah. And I will just send Tammy the link to the article for getting a student's WISE ID as well. All right. Okay, and I don't see any other questions. Thanks for that question, Tammy. Okay. Then we'll come back to our JMC news and upcoming events. We've got some upcoming webinars here. We've got JMC by the numbers next week, and then we're taking a couple weeks off for the holiday. We'll be back on January 8th to talk about best practices for data entry in Iowa non-public schools. And then January 15th, this is one you're going to want to tune in for, getting ready for 25-26. So that move up process that you have to do every year, we'll be working on that on January 15th. And then on the 22nd, we're going to be looking at JMC family feedbackers. And we're ushering in a new year, and with a new year, we've got a new side gig with JMC. Are you just as passionate about supporting schools as we are? Then become a part-time client services specialist, where you'll get to treat others to the same one-on-one customer care you know and love. As CSS Greg Appleby puts it, where else can you work flexible hours in person and remote while being part of a team of like-minded folks? To be considered, please send your resume and cover letter to hr@jmcinc.com. And we've got new JMC innovations in data collection, reporting, and more. Did you know we have a video that covers more than 12 of the latest JMC innovations released to your team and families? From streamlined student data collection to easy management of recurring payments, you can catch the full roundup of JMC time savers over on YouTube. And are you headed to the MSBA Leadership Conference in Minnesota on January 16th? How about the Wisconsin State Education Convention on the 22nd? We can catch up there. Jake and Paul will be manning the JMC booth and would love to chat with you one-on-one. If you have specifics you'd like to discuss during your one-on-one session, please give the guys a heads up at sales@jmcinc.com. And have you explored our community messenger portal? We developed it to take the mess out of community messaging, and now there's even more to love. A brand new dashboard for easy management of communications, contacts, and quick links, a cleaner message log where you can monitor the status of your messages from one spot and pivot as needed, robust filter and search options to make quick work of finding and managing contacts, groups, and messages. To learn more about Community Messenger, watch this video. If you can click on that link when this webinar has been emailed to you. And if you're already using the Community Messenger, you can get the download on the latest enhancements. And on behalf of myself and Greg, thank you for attending this webinar and thank you for choosing JMC.